Hi everyone, it's Robin, and I'm coming to you with a new format that I call VEWS, where I'm sharing important insights I gained as a graphic facilitator on high-level strategic sustainability discussions. And this time I've been to the Global Solutions Summit in Berlin, where key stakeholders like the Chancellor of Germany, Bill Gates, and many others have talked about the current state of the world and the topic of moving beyond the crisis and mobilizing change for global prosperity. So if you're interested how these key conversations actually happen, stay with me and I will lead you through the different images that I have created in my work. So the conversation kicked off in this first image where we really set the stage about the dialogue. And something I got out of there was the image of the iceberg, of course, which depicted how the current crises are actually rooted in more systemic issues that are rooting in the current paradigm we're living in and the worldview. And it was quite interesting that many people really refer to this change of worldview going from individual to interconnected. And from there, we moved into more pragmatic solutions and talked about sustainable solutions, where the Minister of Climate and Economic Affairs, Robert Habeck, was giving a speech about the potentials of climate change. Something I got out of here was the phrase change is chance, and really the opportunities that lie in prosperity and economics and us as humanity and transforming into a more climate neutral society. And that it doesn't imply any pains, but also a lot of gains that we can get out of there. We really get to the top of sustainability transformation. And from this, we went even deeper into the rabbit hole and talked about systemic perspectives on the current crises. And here, the topic of AI was, of course, really prominent, and different stakeholders showed their perspectives on AI and the dangers, especially for democracy, but also the potential and the choice we have in setting the direction. And here, we talked a lot about implementing policies and the framework where the EU is really also leading and providing laws and guidelines so AI can be deployed safely. And of course, that conversation led us to one of the most prominent topics, which is finance and the question of how to finance the transition. Here, the Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, was speaking, and I found it quite interesting, first of all, that he was actually referring to the crisis as a polycrisis, which is a word that I normally only know from like change maker, meta dialogues. And I found it really interesting that, yeah, the leaders of the world actually use that phrase and adopt that multidimensional perspective. And of course, when we talked about money, international institutions were mentioned, and really talking about especially the World Bank and reforming the World Bank to provide a financial framework for the transition. And from that deep dive over the paradigm, systemic solutions, and finance, I had the perspective that we moved a bit more up again into the more practical layers and started talking about the topic of social justice and social sustainability. Here, there were quite some important panel discussions on social inequality and how that is actually connected, of course, with climate change, but also with prosperity. And especially supporting like the grassroots movement, also the eco-feminist transitions in many countries was being talked about, which I also found really interesting, being in this high-level UN-style dialogue to actually witness these kind of conversations. And finally, the conversation converged into a quite inspiring ending when Bill Gates also came up to stage and into the panel discussions and was sharing his perspective as a philanthropist. And here I think this image of the societal vision really stood out because suddenly, after talking about all these crises and all the complex mechanisms that we have to be working on, there was still some space for hope and some space for vision. And that was really true leadership that I've seen in many of the individuals coming up to stage, and something that has been talked about at the summit at large, especially, that we need to step up as leaders individually in our contexts and companies, but also societal to really go forward, engage the different stakeholders, and really work and collaborate together on solving this crisis. So that was my perspective on a Global Solutions Summit. And I know it's quite short, but I really wanted to keep it essential to communicate the spirit that I gained out of the conference. And I think this big image of all the images coming together represents what has been talked about. Because first of all, it's quite colorful and really shows the different cultures and perspectives that we have really invited to this conversation. But also, it shows the complexity of systemic change and how we have to talk about the paradigm, sustainability, technology, finances, social justice, and a societal vision. So I'm curious what you liked about this video. It's a new format I'm trying out. I came to so many high-level conversations that I really wanted to provide something to the public. So let me know if that speaks to you, if you gained anything out of the video, comment below. And of course, if you've been to the summit, maybe share your essences on what you got out of the conversation.